evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Revere Report on a Monday. We are no longer Fridays. If you've been tuning in and you're new and you're figuring out what happened, I thought it was Fridays. It is Mondays, guys. It is Monday. It is a big day. We start the week off right, and what a topic we have today. The Watchers. Who are they? Who were they? Did they exist? Didn't they exist? What's the folklore about them? We're going to get into that. It's going to be a very interesting topic. Going to be joined by Miss Jessie and, of course, Gary Wayne. I mean, how can I do a topic about the Watchers and not have Gary Wayne? I mean, come on. So I know everyone's excited. Everyone's pumped up, and I thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on social media. We are on Telegram. We are on Twitter. We're on Instagram. Guys, again, we're almost at that 50,000 mark. Incredible stuff. A few wonderful people I would like to thank before we get things started, because these are amazing, beautiful women. Stephanie S., Paula G., and Lisa M. Three wonderful, beautiful women who have sent me personal messages saying, we love what you're doing. We love this show. Thank you for sharing it with us and with everyone on YouTube. Keep it on YouTube. Amazing women. So again, Stephanie S., thank you. Lisa G. and Miss Lisa M., thank you so much for your contributions on PayPal to keep the show going. And everything goes a long way. So everythting helps. And I appreciate all the donations, especially during the season of Christmas, which is kind of a holiday for those. A lot of places are shut down and closed. So we're going to try and bring you some informative shows. We are going to be on next week, next Monday. And our guest next Monday is going to be Pastor Dave. He's going to be in the show, and I'm curious to get his take on the holiday, the meaning of Christmas, his take on it. So it's going to be interesting. All right, we're not going to waste any more time because we know you're ready for the show. So give these three ladies a thank you in the comments, and let's get started. Without further ado, another wonderful lady who's an author, has many books available on Amazon, has her own ministry, and she's currently writing a new program. She's always got some type of study that you could be a part of and learn. And she's working on something new. Let's hear about it. Please welcome Miss Jessie Czebotar. Jessie, hi, how are you?
Hey, great. Doing great, George. Yeah. I've got my new series called The Unveiling of the System going down, and you can access that free on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. So a lot of information on there.
Wait a minute. Did you say free? They can go to your website and see it for free?
They can see it for free.
So it's not like NBC, CBS, Fox, or you don't have to subscribe.
I wish.
Well, that's
I wish
great.
I had that many subscribers. No.
Right?
No, I'm thankful. Yeah, it's the best way to gather information, and it's literally a master class. So good stuff on there.
Amazing. Guys, it is Christmas time, and we usually do a breakdown of Christmas and its meaning, but take away the occult aspect of it. It's still a season where families get together innocently, and they try to spend time with one another, break bread, people they haven't seen. They try and raise your spirits, and hopefully you're going to have an amazing holiday season with your friends and your family, and you just get to spend some time with each other, and you get to do something fun, whether it's Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all those things. I just hope, no matter what that is on the occult end, and it's, true heritage and beginnings, what they meant for it, we'll take it, inherit it, and make it our own in a better way. And if you don't know what I mean, go to last year's show on Christmas, and we might even tap into that on the after show. Gary was even saying, hey, we could talk about Christmas, and I was like, I get it. Maybe we'll save that for the after the show, because we will be doing a Q&A for the after show after this on Patreon. My link is in the description. But again, I digress. It's the Watchers. Who are they? Let's bring on my guest, who comes on once a month and shares with us his knowledge, his research, his information. Very well read. 2 books now. He's officially 2 books in, and we are so happy to have him because he brings unbelievable information. When he's on, Jessie talked about it just a second ago, it's a master class. I can't
His books too. I mean, they are an absolute have to have resource. And if you're looking for last minute gift ideas, I encourage you, get those books for your family members. They are a wealth of information.
I mean, you need like so many years of shows like this and so many different guests, and Gary really nails it out in these books. Part one, now part two. And by the way, there's an audio of part two. It's phenomenal. It's incredible. If you're walking, if you're doing shopping in the grocery store, if you're driving in your car, it's a gift that you could get, but it's also information. It's great knowledge. Let's not waste any time. Please welcome Mr. Gary Wayne.
Well, thank you for inviting me back. So happy to be here. And yes, book 2 is out on audio. It came out last Thursday, and it's available on Amazon Audible and iTunes as well. A6 distributes through iTunes as well. So I don't have a link for that, but I've redone the website. And so if you're on the website now, you can link right over to the Kindle edition on Amazon, or you can link right over to the Audible edition as well. And I also have links up there for Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, BarnesandNoble.com. And I was working on it with the website guy today. Didn't hit the revisions that went in today on the website because I had to get the Audible links up there. But if you're living international now, on the international page, there will be a link up there where you can go to Amazon, and there's a little service that I have to pay like $6 a month for, but it's designed to take, if you're in Australia, to take you automatically to the Australia page from there, or to the UK page, or to the different other ones. And I'll be making sure that that's up hopefully this week. If I can get my web guy back on there to do it, I give him the go ahead to hook that up today. So yeah, very excited. And I also noticed on book 2, it's early on the market, but it hit number 1 on Audible.
Whoa!
but not overall, just in the Christian historical theology.
Hey,
and I think
still,
it was number 4 in another group. So yeah,
that's a big deal.
That's a huge deal, Gary. Congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, what an unbelievable thing, especially with our community in general. Those of the faith, because I don't really want to, Catholic, Christian, Protestant, Baptist, so many different religions. I call it the faith. If we all believe in our Lord and Savior, then we're all part of the same faith. I truly believe no matter where you're from, what country, what color, what creed, what size, what area, we're all the same. And so many of us right now are doing great things because the Lord, I believe, is paving a way for us. So we definitely must give him thanks. Congratulations, Gary.
Yeah, so hopefully it continues, and hopefully people like the product. I know I'm getting a lot of good feedback on book 2 or book 1 that came out a couple of months ago, and it's continually doing well. So hopefully people will like this as much. But if you're looking for the footnotes on the sourcing, that's not on the audio. It's just too complicated to do. Yeah. But that's why you get the printed or the digital version, and you can have all of the sourcing notes. And believe me, if you think book 1 has a lot of sources, this one has way more sourcing to it. And it's on the printed version, it's on the same page.
Excellent. Again, another great stocking stucker. It's a great gift idea. So get out there and get it. And we'll post that link, which is in the description below. Guys, the Watchers, who are they? What were they? Are they still around? What's going on? A great connection to the first book, of course, from Gary Wayne. And I'm going to play a clip to start us off. I'm going to ask you all to raise the volume, focus, concentrate on what they say in this clip here about the Watchers. Then I'll get both your takes and we'll get into it. Here it is, the Watchers.
According to the book of Enoch, the Watchers were fallen angelic beings who were assigned to watch over humans. They were described as both the sons of God and the sons of heaven. The women's beauty on earth caught the attention of the Watchers, leading them to abandon their role and become consorts to the women. While not considered canonical in major religions, the Book of Enoch is an intriguing read. It dates back to 300 BC and is recognized as an ancient Jewish text, still holding a place in some modern Christian and Jewish traditions. Enoch after whom the book is named, is mentioned in the book of Genesis as an ancestor of Noah. Chapter 7 of the book of Enoch focuses on the Watchers, described as angelic beings who were supposed to guide humanity but were forbidden from interfering. However, they became infatuated with the beauty of human women and decided to take them as wives, disregarding their original purpose. The leader of the Watchers, Samjaza, initially hesitated but eventually joined the others in their decision. There were 200 Watchers in total who descended to Earth to marry the women. In Chapter 8, it is revealed that the Watchers taught mortal women various forbidden arts, such as sorcery and the manipulation of nature. This act of sharing forbidden knowledge not only betrayed God, but also corrupted humanity. The offspring of the union between the Watchers and human women were called Nephilim, often referred to as giants in the Bible. These Nephilim became destructive and brought chaos to the world, even turning against each other. Chapter 9 depicts Archangel Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel reporting the actions of the Watchers to God. Azazel, one of the Watchers, is singled out for teaching mankind warfare and other forbidden arts. God instructs the archangels to punish the Watchers and their offspring.
Jessie, I'll begin with you. Thoughts on what you just saw and their take on the Watchers according to the book of Enoch.
Yeah, it's interesting how some of the things in the book of Enoch parallel what we see in Genesis 6 in scripture, where it talks about that you have, these fallen ones that, looked at the women of men and saw, a place where they could lay their seed and, proceeded to have these relationships with the women. And, I like that it brought out, what did they teach the women specifically? It was the sorcery, the divination, the witchcraft. And that is really what kind of becomes your basis for the whole occultic system that then progresses forward in history.
Very good. Now, Gary, I know you might go a little bit deeper into this one, but so far, from what you're seeing, what are your thoughts on this depiction, and what do you think?
Yeah, I think it does a pretty good superficial level sort of dive into it. So I think that's fairly consistent with what it's talking about in the book of Enoch. In the book of Enoch, the Watchers are described as the sons of heaven or the children of heaven, depending on which translation that you're doing, which is, we would understand as the sons of God. And they're called sons of God throughout the book of Enoch as well. And it's interesting, again, that parallels exacting sort of language that is in Genesis 6. So, and that the Watchers were ones that are described in the book of Enoch as holy ones as well, who watch. And Gabriel is listed as one of those Watchers. Now, there's, as the video showed, there's loyal Watchers and there's rebellious Watchers. And it's important to sort of understand that. And so the Watchers that are being described in heaven, they're said to be awake all the time in the book of Enoch, which is why it's thought that they have the name Watcher. And so Watchers are also involved in the earth in the book of Enoch and in the governance of the earth and in control of a lot of the religious nature. And as they rebel, obviously that becomes religions and governments opposed to God. So Watcher is actually a word that does show up in the Bible, shows up in Daniel 4 times in verse 12, 13, 23, and 17. And that word watcher goes back to the Hebrew word ear or ayr, depending on how you want to pronounce that, I-Y-R. And it's rooted in a word that's ur, U-W-R. And basically it means to be awake and to watch. And so again, we see this biblical support of the descriptions of these beings that are in the book of Enoch. So it's important to look at the veracity. And I always look at, if we're going to use an outside biblical source, then it needs to run directionally the same with the Bible if we're going to hold some veracity into it. So it can add extra details, but it needs to be consistent with the doctrine of the Bible. So when we look at watchers that are talked about in other cultures, they have a very similar sort of meaning, which sort of goes to the veracity of it. So in some of the translations of the book of Enoch, in 2 and 3, for examples, you might see the word Gregory, which is the translating of watcher as Gregory into the Greek. But there's also a couple other words in Greek that are interesting as well, because one of the watchers was a seraphim, and there's 4 groups of watchers. So that's the other thing you have to keep in mind. You have archangels, you have seraphim, you have ophanim, and you have cherubim. And so when we look at the word drakon and drakonta in Greek for dragon, that means the word watcher. So it's important to understand that seraphim with 6 wings and a serpent face is a dragon angel. And drakonta is also understood as Draco, as a derivative of that word. For Latin, that comes right from Draconia, which is also rooted in Drakonta and Drakon. And so this is a flying 6-winged dragon if it's a seraphim. Now, it's not all of them, but a lot of times you get cherubim that are also described as watchers, and they are a watcher, but also as dragons as well, because they're winged and they just have a different face. So it's one of the things to start to understand as we're talking about the watchers. Now, in Sumer, you have watchers that are also called Anunnaki and Igigi. And of course, Anu is the parent god of the Sumerian pantheon for the parent gods, and An is heaven. And then you have Ki, which also could be pronounced with a G-E at the end. So K-I or G-I, they're phonetically the same. That means the earth. So you have a parent god name in there. You have the earth that's in there, and you also have heaven that's in there. And these are beings of heaven and earth. So you could apply that to a watcher god of the heavens or a offspring of the earth. What's also interesting about that word Igigi, and again, it's important to understand you could be Ijaki with the K or 2 Ks in there if you wanted to go full born on the transliteration of the G and the K. That means watcher in Sumerian as well. And it's rooted in the word Iji, which means eyes, as in to watch. And also it's important to understand that the Ophanim have many eyes. And or when we get this conflated group of beasts, they have many eyes. In the book of Revelation, you actually have 6 wings of the seraphim there. Then you have descriptions that would fit the cherubim, and then you have the eyes of the Ophanim in that conflated image that's in the book of Revelation, which is a bit mysterious. I'm not sure whether it's signifying something different going forward or what is going on there. But when we understand that, you could understand Igigi in the terms of the 2 words that are in there. You have the earth and you have the watchers. So the watchers of the earth or the watchers for the earth. And I think it's probably both. And typically in Sumeria, the offspring of the Igigi or the watchers, the Anunnaki, were also had the same term, just as you have titans of heaven in Greek and titans of the earth, and or heroes, as they're also called, as the giants. So you have that similarity. And the Nephilim is a derivative word of Nephal, meaning fall, and put the I am plural, it's fallen ones. And when you see the word in Isaiah 14, when Satan falls from heaven, that's Nephal. And so they followed him as fallen ones. So that's where the word comes from for those rebellious angels. And then we have two sets of gods in Egypt. Just before I finish here, to mention that you have Urshu gods and Neter gods in the Egyptian pantheon, and that also means watcher for Urshu and ones who watch for Neter, as you take that back to the ancient Egyptians. So you have this constant, and so these are archons, as they're also talked about in the hypostasis of the archons and Gnosticism. An archon means ruler, and it's the source word for archangel, one of the groups of the watchers. And these rulers are the ones that govern in the council of the gods, both in the Bible and other religions, over the 70 nations of the earth, both before and after the flood. So you see the symmetry of these beings, which adds to the veracity that we need to take this seriously.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that out, and about the archons and the four different groups of the watchers. And as you were saying that, I was seeing, like, a lot of times when we go into the Catholic churches, we'll see signs and symbols and, things that appear one way, but I think a lot of times they mean something else. So my question is going to be very specific, but it has to do with a certain symbols. They like to mark their churches or different buildings with what they'll call the cherubic signs, especially for the Golden Dawn. And they'll outline those signs, in several ways. First, you might see it up on the ceiling, or you might see it on the floor, or you might even see it on the altars or the podiums, where they'll use the sign of the eagle, the lion, the man, and the ox. And then they'll parallel that also with four of the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then hidden behind that in the system, they also parallel that with the four mothers of Israel. So my question is, do you think that those cherubic signs are connected to a sign of the watchers, and maybe different churches or buildings that might be calling on those watchers for knowledge and information?
Yeah, certainly. I think that could be understood that way. And the question gets to be, is it loyal cherubim or rebellious cherubim? Because all groups rebelled. And cherubim is a very important part of the occult belief system, not only because they appear in four different images as a single face when they took their physical form on the earth. That ox can also be translated as bull, so that's where I prefer the bull. It's more consistent with the imagery. They were the ones in the occult, that the cherubim were the ones in the occult. Not only were warrior angels, similar to other angels differently, but they had a specific operation. So biblically, we saw them protecting Eden with a flaming sword. In the occult, they're protecting gateways to the other world and the palaces and the temples.
Right.
And so you'll see them in, as these animals with a single head. You don't see the four faces put together. They're also understood in the occult as being a being that's supplied special kinds of wisdom that comes directly from God, that is completely unique and superior in a lot of ways. I can't tell you what those ways are because I'm not at the adept level. So, and I'm not even part of the secret society. So I have to get my information where I can find it. Now, this is a knowledge that is said to come through the third eye, or the single horn and the unicorn, which is an allegory for a cherubim, just as you see those unicorn horses pulling the chariots of God in Greek mythology for Apollo or Zeus, or you name the gods. They all use the same sort of imagery, which is sort of a counterfeit imagery and allegorized of the cherubim pulling God's chariot in Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10. So the cherubim, they hit a special level of understanding in the knowledge cult. And it's different than the knowledge that Azazel provided. And Azazel is likely it was either an archangel or a seraphim. I think seraphim, on the basis of his degradation to being a goat god or a satyr, satyr god. So I think that, I would look at this as being different knowledge than what the seraphim angels would have provided.
Now, the Watchers, it is said that the Watchers were the ones, like you heard in the description, took the daughters of men, mated them to, and created a new race, which you discuss in your first book, called the Nephilim. Before I get there, painting that picture, they taught, and I always learned that they're the ones that introduced the women to root work. It was called root work. Now it's called sorcery and magic, but then it was called root work, where they were able to take things from the earth taught to them by whatever group of these Watchers for healing purposes and to manifest certain things and desires. So this was taught to them. So they bring a lot of knowledge, which they were told not to. Okay, that said, a woman said something in the chat I found interesting. This is Mary. Mary says, they say Jesus descended into hell after he died and maybe talked to the Watchers. Is there any reference from the Bible about both these things? So I thought that was an interesting thing in regards to this. So I wanted to bring this up and get both your takes. We'll begin with Jessie. What's your take on that comment?
Yeah, I believe, you do get some scripture with the descended into, but that is more commonly seen as a, direct reference from some of the different early Christian beliefs and things like that. I haven't heard directly that he descended to talk to the Watchers, but I'm curious as to what Gary will say about that.
Interesting. Gary, I want to give it to you. And if you have anything, and if you don't, that's fine. There's no comment. But is there anything that you could add to this question here?
Yeah, I would encourage people to read 1 Peter 3. And in there, while Jesus is still in the grave, he goes and he talks to the spirits that are in hell or Tartarus, which is the pit prison. And we're not told what he's saying to them. There's only two groups of people in the pit prison. One is the Watcher fallen angels, the ones who did the worst crimes, and or the terrible ones, which are the demonic spirits of the Nephilim that they produced in Rephaim after the flood. And they're in the sides of the abyss with these terrible ones. And so I think he went there not to just sort of view them. I mean, he's part of the Alpha Omega, so he went there to deliver a message.
Wow.
And I think the message based on another interesting passage in the book of Corinthians, where it talks about if the fallen angels or the princes, the archons, the archangels, the rulers of this world had known about the resurrection, they wouldn't have crucified Jesus. So they didn't know that. And so when he's in the grave for 3 days, he's talking to these spirits. And I think my speculation here is that they're pretty shocked to see him. And number two, he's basically telling them that your fate is sealed. And when I resurrect on the Sunday, understand this is me ad-libbing here.
Of course.
Your rebellion is completely over, because we don't get told what he's told. But what we do know is that lake of fire, just as the pit prison was created for the rebellious ones and the worst of the demons, the lake of fire is also created as eternal punishment for both groups as well in Matthew 25. So I think it's and it's all information that Jesus is providing us. So I think that's all interlinked. But understand, I've connected a couple of dots, but we do know he went there.
So we do know that he went there. So that's there. There's scripture. You've mentioned what they could read in regards to Peter to get more on that. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, he went to the Watchers. We don't know for sure what he said. You're saying to deliver their fate. This is
yeah, I think that's very possible. That's exactly what it was.
To deliver their fate, to see them. But this is unbelievable. You know, the topic is the Watchers, who are apparently, and you both are confirming, they were to watch over us. Correct? They weren't supposed to intercede in any way, or were they supposed to help us in some way? I got to know that before we move on to the next one. Were they meant to help us in some way, in a positive way, or no way at all? We'll begin with Jessie.
I think they were. You know, I think back to I'll hit it from the opposite side. Instead of scripture, I'll kind of come from knowledge within the occult. You know, they're sought after for wisdom, knowledge, understanding, all things that people could get from God, but instead, you know, they want to seek something outside of God because they don't want to bow the knee, or, you know, in their pride, they don't want to confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So in that, you know, even though these same people are in scriptures, they're also going to seek that knowledge from outside. And when we look at it that way, you know, these beings were, I think, meant to help. Part of what I think, you know, was the job was that they were to kind of be that interface between the physical and the spiritual worlds. We know that there's a connection with a lot of those beings and the spiritual gates, whether originally they had full access to those gates as waterways where, you know, they could come and go between the heavenly places and the lower realms. I think that that's, you know, what they were able to do. And we see the connection in the occult where that's part of the knowledge that they pass on, how to operate the gates, even though they themselves cannot enter in. They become those who kind of stand as a door at the gate, and only, you know, there's only certain ways you can get through those gates. And a lot of times you got to go through, you know, making contracts, especially with, you know, fallen ones like Metatron. You know, he's one of the big ones who has access. You even see that in his sigil, that in his sigil design, what's in the design, it's, you know, gate accesses. So I think that was part of it, was, you know, was there originally a way created where they could come and go? Men were in the Garden of Eden, but God was going to dwell with them there. But once they were cast out, you know, they began to teach how to access different things. I think that's very possible. But
Gary, I want you to give me your take. Do you believe, and what I just asked Jessie about the fallen ones? What are your thoughts on that?
So ideally, if you take it back to their creation before any sort of rebellion, they're there to do God's bidding and to follow God's ways and whatever laws and restrictions that are set down. So the question I asked myself when I was trying to work my way through this is when did they rebel? Did they rebel after Eden? Or were they part of an earlier rebellion? And if Satan had rebelled by Eden, then did other angels rebel with them? And then you start getting into, you know, some rabbit holes in terms of how old the earth is. But the sons of God aren't creating these giants until Genesis 6, so hundreds of years later, right? So when did they rebel is one of those is an important question. And was that when they rebelled, was that what had them do things against humankind? So I tend to think that the angels had already rebelled by Eden.
Well, okay, I got to pause you there.
Yeah.
Before you go. That key question, the first question, and I want a yes or no answer. Were the Watchers there just to watch over human beings, or were they there to report back and maybe intercede if they needed some help?
Their role was just to guide and help humanity, but they couldn't provide illicit knowledge and technology, right? That would be part of the restrictions.
Okay.
Right.
So I think that the fallen angels, they actually led the day 6 people astray and the Nahash beings astray. So that rebellion is predated, but the Adamites are created because, as you probably have made aware in the show, I think there's a different creation in Genesis 2 to Genesis 1 because the details don't match up and the Bible doesn't contradict itself. So the Adamites are created for a special commission, and they're going to be raised up somehow, some way to be higher than angels. And I think that's what starts this change in position, not just leading them astray, but now providing knowledge that can destroy the earth, and also to create a race of beings to do the dirty work, the giants, to wipe humankind from the face of the earth so that we cannot reach our destiny. And so I think that's what we see starting to happen. So these fallen angels are the rulers of the earth, and they obviously, I think, by the example of the serpent being, the Nahash being, is already, created him as a necromancer, as a sorcerer. It's all polytheist sort of terms, right? And I think that they're going to be working with Satan in the pantheon that they've created already, that Cain is going to introduce, because he introduces this polytheist religion with Enoch a lot sooner than the creation of the giants. And down the road, they provide daughters, probably of the Cainites, to create the giants. So there's this period in there that I think there's this interplay. It hasn't reached the second revenge, as I like to call it, with the first revenge being using the serpent in Eden to bring down Adam and Eve. The giants is the second one, and they're there to try and destroy the earth by fire and to wipe humankind from the face of the earth. And so I think that they transgress the restrictions that were previously provided. So they've led people away. They worship the fallen angels before the creation of the Adamites, but they didn't create the giants. They didn't give illicit knowledge to destroy the earth and technology by fire. So I think that's the change that happens.
Okay. Now, there are things that are, of course, taught through Enoch. The book of Enoch is pretty clear on the description of what the Watchers were there for: to watch over us, to maybe help us, but not in a negative way, but to keep us on the right path, is my belief in what I read, and it was my intake of it. So I wanted to get both your takes, because there's another take of this. And the other take of this is very interesting. And a movie came out in 2014 called Noah. It's a biblical drama, and it starred Russell Crowe. Let me just give you a quick synopsis of what they wrote about it. When God decides that mankind, I repeat, when God decides that mankind has become too sinful and must be wiped off the earth. This is a simple synopsis on the movie Noah, because human beings were bad. This is a picture of their take of the Watchers communicating with Noah and his family. Here's another picture of this movie, their take on the Watchers in the movie Noah 2014, starring Russell Crowe. I'm going to play a clip from this movie. I hope this show doesn't get shut down. If it does, I apologize, everybody. We might have to just go to Patreon after this, but I have to play it because it has great context in it. It's less than a minute, just under a minute, and I tried to squeeze as much info as I can. Here are the Watchers in the movie Noah explaining to the star, Russell Crowe, what they were there for, what their creation was, and what happened. I think you're both going to have an interesting take on this. So here it is. Take a listen.
The Creator formed us on the second day, the day He made the heavens. We watched over Adam and Eve, saw their frailty and their love, and then we saw their fall, and we pitied them. We were not stone then, but light. It was not our place to interfere, yet we chose to try and help mankind. And when we disobeyed the Creator, He punished us. We were encrusted by your world. Rock and mud shackled our fiery glow. Still we taught mankind all we knew of creation.
Rock and mud covered their glow. They were there to help mankind. Help. And when they did, they disobeyed the Lord, so He punished them. Jesse, will begin with you. Your thoughts on that synopsis in this movie. Of course, just a movie, but your thoughts.
What's interesting to me about it, and they didn't necessarily bring it out in this, but the connection just with the name Noah in the first place is that, the connection between that and rest and God's initial command, that creating the seventh day for the rest, that there should be a place for the Spirit of God to rest. And, when you see that, the disobedience, there's a lack of rest in that, a desire to go one's own way and to do things contrary to what is the will of God. And I think that, that's a vital part in what that movie's saying, is that, these Watchers were those that directly chose to be outside of God's will, to do what they thought was best, to do it their way versus being obedient to God. And so that's where I would take that.
Okay. Gary, your take on this explanation of the fallen ones, the Watchers, what they perceive. Again, this is maybe not what they feel, or is it in some occult way, how they're trying to paint? Because to me, they're painting that humans were bad. That's what they're painting. Humans were bad, but we know that that's not the reason for the destruction. We know that the flood came to destroy these giants that were breeded between the Watchers and the daughters of Cain, Canaanites. So give me your thoughts on what you just heard.
Yeah, it hits on a number of levels. So first of all, they like to pose themselves as angels of light, just as Satan does, and that they're here to free humankind and to help humankind against the oppressive God of the Bible. So that's the first thing to keep in mind in terms of how they turn things inside out and upside down. So it was interesting that they said that they pitied humankind after their fall in Eden, and yet their leader, and who knows, many of those other angels are depicted in Eden, in the trees of Eden, in the allegories, that they may have been in Eden as well. But certainly we know Satan was working with, as their leader, was working with the serpent to bring Adam and Eve down. And now they're ostracized, and now they pity them. They don't pity them. They're there to finish them off. But and so the people they're going to help are the spurious offspring, the giants and the followers of Cain. So they use that sort of, well, Canaanites were Adamites and we were helping them. and they don't tell you the whole story, but that's kind of the way that they work. So they're there to have this knowledge in place to try and recruit humankind to rebel against God. And to do that, just as in the end time, we have to be supplied the angelic technology. So we believe that we can stand against the God of the Bible and fight against them, and that they're actually the good guys and the God of the Bible is evil. So we always have to keep that in mind in terms of the role reversal. I also found it interesting that, one of those rock type creatures kind of had a serpentine head. It was the second image on the close up there that was suggesting a seraphim like degradation into that sort of image. And rocks is also associated with fallen angels, some of them like with Azazel, who is chained with to rocks, as he's described in the book of Enoch. And so that's kind of interesting as well, that's all in play there as well. And these angels are there to help build the ark as well for Noah in the movie. And that's not what the Bible says. So we're getting a Gnostic version of the Bible. And they also have Tubal Cain surviving on the ark, not in the Bible, but one of the rivers or streams in the Gnostic thought. You could have, let's say, from Jewish mysticism, it's Og who's a stowaway on the Bible. And then some of the Gnostic accounts, Ham is a giant. And in other ones, all three sons are giants. And other ones, the whole family are giants. They have different sort of variations on that. So understand that they have, through nuance, changed the story and the details.
Yeah.
Especially with the water. I mean, as you're talking about that, because that's where the arcane energy comes from in their studies, is learning to move that energy through water or through light, and you get that all that symbology of these creatures that supposedly say they were light, and then they come down and the Lord's going to judge them with water. And you get the Holy Spirit looking for a place to rest, but there isn't any rest on the water. Yet even within that, Noah's in an ark, so you've got like kind of these repeating themes. But the one that stood out as you were talking about the rock is that it'd just be interesting if there's a connection between that and the place Rephidim, where the Lord, as Israel's coming out of that place of wilderness, he brings them to Rephidim, which is basically moon-shaped, high mountainous, rocky crag area where it just has this little alcove that has a ledge where it's perfect to lay down and rest. And the Lord leads the people there for one night, but that's where Israel really puts down their foot, becomes obstinate, and basically says, we're not going to follow you any longer. There's no water here. Did you lead us to this place to die? And they accuse God of, leading them to that place to die. But it's interesting that just all the interwoven themes between rest and rocks and these beings,
Yeah, and Rephidim was the battle that was against the Amalekites that were trying to wipe them from the face of the earth. That happened a little bit later. One last thing on that question is that the Gnostic doctrine that's being portrayed there, in summary, is that the God of the Bible keeps humanity enslaved in ignorance and forced to worship him, and that the fallen angels provide knowledge as part of the freedom and are going to help free them through the illicit knowledge that they're providing them to be rebellious and win a place to live with the fallen angels in a separate realm. So it's all consistent Gnostic doctrine. It's just very subtly played that, we're just providing them help so that they can survive. Well, they'll go way beyond that. They're giving them the ability to destroy the world with fire. But that knowledge tends to go to the Canaanites and the giants, who use that to create the violence that brings the flood. And the other thing is what's really interesting there is, in their own accounts of the flood, it is the fallen angels that bring the gods that bring the flood, because the giants are too violent in those accounts and the humans too noisy. And yet they blame it on God. Now, biblically, God is bringing the flood, or he permits the flood. You could interpret that either way. So they may be forced to bring the flood as part of the punishment to watch their followers and their offspring die as part of the consequences of violating the laws.
Man, I mean, it's a lot to take in. And we only have an hour show. We got about, 8 minutes left in this program before we go to the after show on Patreon for a Q&A, and we're going to touch on a few different things there as well. However, I want to finish off strong in regards to something. We know, or at least we're told, that the Watchers were enslaved. They were put in chains in different parts of the world, not just in one part, is what I'm told here. So different parts of the world in chains. And a time would come when these chains would be loosened, they would be free, able to wreak havoc upon the earth, part of Revelation. So I'm going to play a clip in regards to that. And they say one of the telltale signs, one of the main signs we need to watch out for, is when the river Euphrates dries up. That's a tail sign of when we should keep our eyes open for this to come, opening of the floodgates of these fallen ones, these Watchers, to leave their chains and come wreak havoc on earth. I'm going to play a clip, and I'm going to ask for both of you to comment on it and what your thoughts on it. So turn up your volumes, take a listen to this.
Millions in Syria and Iraq are facing water shortages as the region's longest river, the Euphrates, dries up.
In the recent mind-boggling events at the Euphrates River, certain theories and dark prophecies have begun to spread within the public. Tales of a doomsday and apocalypse have taken root in the hearts of many. The day may just be right around the corner, especially given the shocking events like the harrowing noises occurring in the Euphrates River. Doomsayers have cited many reasons and mapped out the possible future events that may befall humanity in the soon coming apocalypse. But amid the crazy theories, prophecies, and spine-chilling discoveries in the Euphrates, many questions exist.
Jessie, begin with you. Your thoughts.
Yeah, we know in the book of Revelations that it talks about, Azazel and his legion of armies. That's listed as some of the end time things to happen. And you do have the apocalypse symbology that is connected to certain Watchers. Is that part of God's judgment of men? Is that part of their job, is to be enforcers of certain judgments here on earth? And what is the capacity of that? And what happens as we see these things, occurring? We know that the prophecies say that the river will start to dry up, and we know that leads then to Azazel being released for a time with his army. So what do you think on that, Gary?
Gary, your thoughts on what you just saw about these premonitions? The river Euphrates is now drying up. First, this is going to be a quick one because we have a few minutes, but do you believe, first of all, that the Watchers are enslaved or chained in the earth, different areas? Some say Antarctica, some say the river Euphrates underneath. But that's part one. Part two, do you think that those premonitions have some truth to them? When it dries up, tell signs of possible havoc being unleashed on Earth.
Yes, but let's not get ahead of biblical chronology for the end time. That's a last 7-year event, and that the river is going to be dried up. So in Revelation 16, so the armies can gather for Armageddon. There are 4 angels that are chained in the book of Revelation to the Euphrates River. Those are for a special time in the last 7 years. And those would have to be very powerful angels. And in the book of Enoch, we do get 4 powerful archangels that seem to be on the 4 sides of the throne of God and over the 4 groupings of angels as the head. One would deduce these are fallen angels that are chained that are going to be released in the end time. Now, that should not be confused with the ones that come up out of the pit prison in Revelation 9. But they're all released just at a slightly different particular point in time in the last 7 years. So very important prophecy, but we're nowhere near that as well at this point in time. So unless of course I'm dead wrong on the chronology, but I think we are in the fig tree generation. So I do believe we're in that generation. I do believe we're in the sorrows, but we are not at the point of even the seals opening, let alone the trumpets where the pit is opened and released, and Azazel's going to come out as the chief of the host of the army of fallen angels that are in there. He is, they call them Shemiyaza. I think they're the same angel. Shemiyaza's name doesn't end in El, so it's a title that probably applies to Azazel. Shem being renowned, famous, infamous, and also dually goes back to heavens, as in Shemaim, or the heavenly ones. And Yaza is an Arabic and a Zen word for an angelic being. And I think that those are both the same angel. So I would look at Azazel coming out of the pit prison, but it's different than the ones, those are different angels that are at the Euphrates rivers that are chained. So I'm not sure which ones they are. But just as in Enoch, you have the top 7, but then you have 4 that include, Gabriel and Michael as 2 of them as quick examples of those 4 of the top 7. So I would expect the counterfeited host would have that same hierarchy of rulers.
Wow.
So I have a quick question. Would you then connect, or what would you say, like, could they try to fake end time apocalyptic things? Do you think that maybe the draining of the Euphrates River could be connected to a man-made thing to make people fear that we're in those last days?
Yeah, I think the sorrows, I think the seal catastrophes, I think the trumpet catastrophes are all contrived. They're brought on by the rulers of this world, both visible and invisible, to try and convince people that the end time in the last 7 years is sooner, and that they can use that to have a war that would happen in Revelation 9, same as Joel 1 and 2 and Ezekiel 38 and 9. That would be the Armageddon War.
So kind of like trying to force God's hand to meet him on the battlefield.
They would love to have that happen sooner, but they can't because of the restrainer. But that's always their attempt. But for sure, they want to do everything in a counterfeit way to deceive people that they think it's going to be the day of the Lord before it is. And even in Revelation 6, where there's only 25% destruction, as you get to the end of that chapter, you have all the great ones and rulers of the earth going into their underground caves and cities or bunkers or whatever they've created for themselves, tunnels, because they think it's the day of the Lord. It's that bad, but
and I think that's part of what they're faking too, even faking the day of the Lord and bringing in a false Lord.
Yes.
Instead of the real Lord who's there.
Yes, because the delusions are going to be so powerful that even the elect will be deceived if that were possible. And that's
Right.
how you do it.
Yeah. Interesting conversation, guys. Interesting. Again, the watchers, so much. You could go in so many different directions. We only have an hour. I want to thank Jessie and Gary for being on the show. Following this, we're going to be on Patreon for a special Q&A where you may have some questions to be answered, and maybe Jessie and Gary will be able to answer those. So we appreciate that. My link is in the description on PayPal coming up next. And a specific thing I want to touch on the after show. Jessie, you mentioned that December 24th, there's going to be some type of ritual, maybe some prayers talking about gates.
Opening of 5 holy doors.
Well, I want to get into
Vatican
that.
made an announcement.
I want to talk about the Vatican making a holy announcement.
Yeah.
These doorways, what do they mean? What's behind them? Is there any association to the watchers? We're going to get into it on the after show on Patreon. So join today. Link is in the description coming up next. Before we sign off, Jessie, anything to say to all the fans watching?
Yeah, I appreciate everybody coming, and if you can support Gary, I encourage you to gift his new book or audiobook. I'm excited about both, and I certainly have mine coming. So thanks for coming, Gary.
Gary, anything to share with everyone before we sign off?
Sure. I just want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and to be careful not to fall into polytheist rituals. We're going into a very important holiday for the occult, which is the Yuletide Sabbath, which is the last one of the year at the solstice. It lasts 12 days, the 12 days of Christmas, and it's also the 12 days of Odin's hunt, and the horn god is a satyr god. So stay away from everything that is polytheist because you don't want to be participating in rituals.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gary. Guys, again, thank you for watching. We're going to the after show next. Maybe we'll dive a little bit deeper into this Christmas show. I know that Gary wanted to touch on it a little bit more, but a lot of people have requests on the watchers. I wanted to deliver that. Next week, Pastor Dave is going to be here. He's kind of like a doctor. And he's going to be joining us with Jessie, and it's going to be a great show next week. So join us next Monday. It's going to be great. The following Monday is the 30th, the day before New Year's. There's not going to be a show that day. I will not be in town, so you get a day off. This Thursday on Patreon, I'm also going to do a report. World news, what's going on? Guys, a lot happening in Canadian politics and the world. Tune into that. Again, I thank you all for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. And we hope you join us next week or on Patreon for the after show coming up next. Guys, thanks for watching. God bless and good night, everyone.